guys? Welcome back to the Jenks Island Podcast, the only NFL podcast where we get your takes from a washed-up Division III cornerback and his friends. I'm your host, Grayson Jenkins, joined again by my great friend and co-host, Ty. In today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the divisional slate of NFL playoff games for you guys. Last week, we had the wild card games, and they were actually pretty solid. There was, I think, like 4 out of the 6 ended up being really good games. Obviously, the last 2 were not kind of the best games. They were kind of close through the first 3 quarters, and then the blowouts. And then the team just fell too far behind. But getting right into the divisional slate, the first game on this docket, Ty, are going to be the Bills taking on your Broncos in Denver. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, this was interesting. So they opened up as home underdogs. Now it looks like they're at -1.5. So the lines have slowly moved towards favoring Denver. And I think probably a decent bit of that comes from the injury report for the Bills, losing a lot of guys. Shavers obviously played that first half of the torn ACL, but especially Josh Allen just being so banged up. I think they listed like 3 different injuries. There's like ankle, hand, and something else. Like, and that entire team. I mean, they go through Josh, right? He carries them offensively, all the momentum and the vibe of the team. Like he is their leader. And obviously defensively, they're not great, but when the offense starts rolling and Josh Allen starts rolling, that defense starts playing at a higher level, forces some turnover. So, with him being a little bit banged up, I think, obviously come into the game, he'll be as fresh as he possibly can be. But can Denver get a lot of hits on him is the question throughout the whole game. Obviously this defense, ton of pressures, ton of sacks all season long. But can that convert against one of the hardest guys to sack in the NFL? Probably the hardest guy to sack in the NFL just because of his sheer size, his speed, like his intelligence too. He understands angles and what he's trying to do out there when he scrambles so well. So I think that's one of the true keys of the game, just Denver getting Josh Allen down. And then on the flip side, right, running the football against his team. Obviously, they do a great job defensively in the secondary, disguising things. Sean McDermott is a really smart defensive guy. So, they're allowing the least amount of passing yards per game on defense. But I think part of that is because their run game is so bad. And teams know they can take advantage of their run game. Big game for RJ Harvey. Obviously, no J.K. Dobbins this week. So RJ and Jaleel McLaughlin, especially, they both need to ball out. I hope that Jaleel gets a little bit more carries because he was more efficient in the last game than RJ Harvey was. But if it's RJ, he's really got to step up to the plate against a weaker defensive front. So I'm going to go with Denver in this one. I think that RJ will be able to kind of get it going, but I think the bigger factor is the Denver defense. They play a ton of man. They're going to be able to be sticky on some of these subpar receivers with Keon Coleman out there and Brandon Cooks in his elder age. So I think Denver's defense is going to be able to step up, bring Josh Allen down, and just be sticky in man coverage. So give me the Broncos here.
Yeah, no, I am going to pick the Broncos here too. Just real quick though, talking about the Bills, like you said, they only have 3 starting receivers healthy right now. And that's just not where you want to be going against a Broncos defense that is one of the best defenses in the league in both the pass and run game. And especially with pressure on the quarterback, like you said, if they can get home, it's just going to be tough because there's not going to be a lot of separation from the receivers, right? Keon Coleman has been the guy that they drafted him to be that receiver 1. He's not a guy that gets separation. Brandon Cooks is a solid vet guy. Maybe he can get a few completions and maybe the tight ends will get open for Josh Allen. But if there's quick pressure, it's going to be tough for Josh Allen to find guys down the field. That being said, the run game is really where the Bills are going to have to find it. But the Broncos defense, I want to say, is second in yards per game or yards per carry. No, they're second in yards per game in the running game, and then third in yards per carry in the running game. So that's massive for the Broncos to be able to, if you can slow down James Cook in this game, it massively swings the game in their favor. Last week, the Bills, I was surprised that the Jaguars went away from the run, which is what we were just talking about, right? The Bills' run defense isn't as great. And the Jags went away from it. I think Etienne only had 10 carries, something like that last game, and they stopped really running the ball. Basil Tootin had a couple good runs, stopped giving him the ball. It really seemed like it slipped away once they stopped running the football and the Bills started coming back, and that really killed them. I'm going to go with the Broncos here. If they can limit the Bills from getting 10 yards a carry on a tush push, then I think the Broncos should be able to win this game as well. Moving on to the next game, we got the 49ers taking on the Seahawks. Here, the 49ers, right, move on past the Eagles, but they lose George Kittle in the process. the Philadelphia Eagles offense was absolutely atrocious. They didn't really seem like they knew what they were doing the whole entire game. And that was yet again continuous of that Kevin Patullo should be fired trend that we saw all over across Twitter. A lot of NFL pundits were talking about it. They decided to fire him after the season was over and not during the season. So obviously that didn't pay off for the Eagles there. And now out of the playoffs, the 49ers move on. Obviously, Shanahan is doing a great job of coaching this team, right? They have an insane amount of injuries on this team, and they're somehow progressing week in, week out with Brock Purdy on the offensive side of the ball, with Christian McCaffrey on the offensive side of the ball. They're creating plays to make things happen. And the defense, they're also still making plays, even though the defense is extremely limited and you have Fred Warner out. Obviously, he's running right now, so maybe he'd be able to get back next week or the Super Bowl. But without those guys, it's tough for this 49ers team already. The Seahawks on the other side are one of the best defenses in the league as well. We got the rest of the playoffs. We had the three of the, I'd say the top three defenses in the league with the Broncos, the Seahawks, and the Texans. So when we're talking in these games, these defenses can massively swing the games in their favor. The Seahawks are going to rely on getting turnovers on the 49ers. Sam Darnold might cough up the football a few times in this game, just because that's kind of what we've seen from Sam Darnold in the last few games. He had 20, I think, in the regular season, which is not at all like what you want to see from a quarterback. But when you have a top defense, you can make it happen. So give me the Seahawks here in this one. The defense is going to outplay the 49ers offense. And I think the Seahawks offense will be able to put enough points to get the win. Ty, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Seattle here too. I think that, Sam Darnold, he's taking care of the ball pretty well against the
Yeah.
49ers in both their matchups. Obviously, they are a banged up unit. They're not going to be able to force a lot of turnovers against a far more diverse and less predictable offense in Seattle than against who they played last week in Philadelphia. I think that was really the key for San Francisco. Obviously, Brock Purdy struggled in that game. They started to take advantage of things later in the game, but defensively, right? They knew every single play what Philadelphia was going to run, because that offense is so predictable. Hence why Kevin Patullo ended up getting fired the other day. So it's not going to be as predictable right in this game. Clint Kubiak has done a great job of scheming things up, scheming JSN open, scheming up the run game, especially late in the season. Walker and Charbonnet have really stepped up and been a difference maker for this team. In a run game that was pedestrian to start the season, and we talked about as had a lot of potential, but just wasn't there at that point in time. They've taken that next step offensively. I don't think that San Francisco, I know that they're coached well, but I don't think that they're going to build a matchup with that. So give me Seattle.
Yeah, it's just like you said, right? It is a divisional game, so it could be like closer. And obviously, in the first two games, that this game was relatively close. But I do think that the Seahawks are just the better team, especially with all the injuries. So I agree, Seahawks here. Moving on, Ty, the Houston Texans are taking on the Patriots. I obviously picked the Steelers to beat the Texans. I was banking on Aaron Rodgers' magic a little bit in the playoffs. That obviously did not happen, and he might go out pretty sad. That there was a pretty sad ending if that is Aaron Rodgers' last career game. But they're taking on the Patriots here, who really just shut down Justin Herbert and the Chargers. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, shut down Justin Herbert and the Chargers. But on the flip side, right, I think the bigger story is Drake Maye against that LA defense, right?
Mhm.
He kind of struggled throughout that game. Really, the defense kind of just carried them to late in that game, and then the offense started to get it going a little bit. But against a far worse defense, right? The Chargers probably middle of the pack. Maybe towards the upper half, maybe like close to that top 10. This Houston defense is probably the best defense in the NFL. They force turnovers, they fly to the ball, they have a great pass rush. Like they are such a they're a complete defense, but they are a fast defense, right? And I think that's what separates them from Denver and Seattle a little bit, is that they just fly to the ball from the front end to the linebackers to the back end. All those guys are really just anything that is a quick slant or an outside zone, they're
Mhm.
there just like that on it. So it makes things a lot harder. You kind of have to do push down field on them, but that's tough when you have such a good defensive front like they do. So I think they're going to really, confuse Drake May a bit in this game if he was looked confused against the Chargers defense. And I know we've talked a ton about, if CJ Stroud doesn't play well, how can this team go far? CJ Stroud in games that he's thrown 3 interceptions this season is undefeated. So, that just goes to
It's
show
insane.
how good defensively they are. despite however bad their offense might be, the defense is going to step up, make plays, score for them when they have to, right? They obviously scored twice last game for
Mhm.
them. And they've started to get the running game going a little bit with Woody Marks, with a Nick Chubb. It's going to be a huge hit if Nico Collins is out, because Christian Gonzalez is going to be able to match up with Christian Kirk. And this is Nico's second concussion, so there's a chance that he doesn't make it through concussion protocol. But, I think that, like I said, it doesn't matter what this offense does in the passing game. They'll at least be able to run the football and play good defense. And so for that reason, I'm going to take the Houston Texans in this game.
Yeah, they only scored 16 points against the Chargers defense. So, yeah, in this game, I mean, CJ Stroud could throw another 3 picks, or whatever, have a bunch of turnovers like he did in the last game, and they could still easily win this game. I think that the defense is going to be flying around, like you said, and I just can't put it past them to lose this game. I don't think the Patriots, right? Like I said it in the last week when I picked the Chargers to win the game, they didn't play a whole lot of competition. And now that they are, I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back. And I think they did against the Chargers, right? They didn't have the best game offensively, especially like you said. Their defense had a solid game, but I think more than anything, Justin Herbert just looked way out of sort. Like he was missing a bunch of open guys, wasn't making the right reads, wasn't moving around well in the pocket, was nervous in the pocket. You could just tell it wasn't the Justin Herbert that we've seen in the regular season, which is what we've come to know for Justin Herbert. Is in the playoffs, he regresses very, very heavily, and that's becoming a trend now. And I know that's a little bit separate from this game, but that worries me with Justin Herbert. But the Patriots obviously won that one, but I think the Texans will be able to win this game as well. So I think we're 3 for 3 on agreeing on our picks so far. Let's see if we go to the game 4 agreeing as well. We got the Rams taking on the Bears here in Chicago. Ty, obviously the Bears coming back has been a story for them this season. They've had numerous comebacks in miraculous fashions. They've had 2 against the Packers now, and the second one, I don't know if it was crazier than the first one. I mean, the first one had an onside kick and overtime, but this one, the Packers really, in my opinion, it was the Packers letting it slip away more than anything than luck. Like, I just think the Packers weren't calling a good offensive game plan to end the game. Obviously, there was a drop by Jaden Reed that really hurt them. But I do, and missed field goals. I won't let those. McManus will never be on the field again for the Packers. Like, that should never happen in the playoffs. But the Bears offense struggles to start football games. And I don't know if you can do that against a Rams team that plays all 4 quarters relatively well. And they're especially good in the fourth quarter. Like, I mean, we've seen Matthew Stafford do it multiple times in the playoffs before. The year they won the Super Bowl, they had multiple comebacks. This year, they already came back against the Panthers on a clutch drive. And Matthew Stafford struggled in the last game until that second half really came, and he really started hitting his throws, making the right reads. He had a couple iffy passes, one that was an interception dropped. I think Puka was kind of playing defense on it, made a good play. But this one, if you start off slow against the Rams, I don't think you can really come back, because I think the Rams offense will be able to keep the pedal to the floor all game long. And if they're behind even in this game, they're still not out of it until the very end. And that's kind of what we've seen with the Bears, but their defense is weaker than the defense for the Bears is probably the worst in the playoffs. If it's not, I mean, I shouldn't say that. The Rams defense is also not very great, but this game doesn't have a battle of good defenses, right? You're not like the Texans, or you're not the Patriots worrying about the Texans defense. You're not the 49ers worrying about the Seahawks defense. You're not the Bills worrying about the Broncos defense. This game, the Rams will be able to dice up the Bears defense the whole game. The Bears, if they start slow, won't be able to win. So I'm going to pick the Rams here. Ty, who do you got?
Yeah, I think it's important to note like what the strength of this Rams defense is, and we talked about it all season long. It's that defensive front, and the strength of the
Mhm.
Bears offense is the running game. So, as opposed to Carolina really took advantage of the Rams through the air, with Tet and Coker and guys like that having some success through the air. I know that Caleb has played well in the fourth quarter, but he has not played well in the first 3 quarters, like you mentioned. So, they're not going to be able to take advantage of them through the air like they're supposed to, and kind of coast a win. Like you said, LA is going to play well for 4 quarters. Before the half, Puka Nakua dropped a wide open touchdown
Mhm.
against the Panthers. Like, that game shouldn't have even been that close. Same with the Bears game, down 21-3. Like, that game might have cost LaFleur his job, because there was a 0% chance of the Bears winning
Yeah.
that game. and somehow they did, despite Caleb Williams throwing 2 interceptions. Like, overall, he did not play well, and he came to that fourth quarter and he played well, and that's kind of been the story with him. But yeah, like you said, it's not going to be able to happen against the Rams. I trust this offense to be consistent for 4 quarters. I trust the defensive front to be able to stop that run game, the rushing attack with Monunga and Swift. And I just don't trust the Bears to be able to pull it off. And I know there's a lot of hoopla about, the Rams that playing in cold weather and yada yada yada. This isn't Jared Goff and Cooper Kupp. This is Matt Stafford, who's had a lot of success in cold weather games. Took the Philadelphia Eagles last year
Yep.
down to the last drive, pretty much in a snow game in Philly. If it weren't for Jalen Carter getting in, I believe in this Rams team to go into Chicago and knock off the 2 seed, because there's no reason that this team should even be here. It should have been Green Bay.
Yeah, it took Kyren Williams fumbling the ball really to hold the Rams from beating the Eagles last year in my eyes. And I think their offense did play well in the snow. Like, it wasn't a bad game for them by any means. And the Bears on the other side, like you said, Caleb Williams did throw 2 picks. And yes, he had that just immaculate throw on 4th and 7. I don't want to discount that. But once again, it took until the very, very clutch moments. It took until they're far behind for him to start playing like we all expect him to, right? Like, he needs to play a full 4-quarter game for me to pick him in one of these games against a really, really strong offense.
And no one's more clutch than Matt Stafford, too. No one's going to out-clutch him, right? He's going to have the ball last. He's going to be the guy to go down and score that game-winning touchdown, field goal, whatever it may be. I know Caleb's been great throughout the season, but Matt Stafford's been great at that for a decade plus. So,
Yeah, so that'll do it for our picks. I know we're 4 for 4. We all agreed. We agreed with each of the games. But let me ask you, Ty, what are your thoughts on the teams that lost last week? Were there any big thoughts you had on the games? I know that the Chargers, obviously, Herbert struggled in the playoffs yet again. You had the Packers, Jordan Love, immaculate game to start, and then at the end kind of fell apart, but the last 2 plays specifically, he didn't really play well. The Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, obviously they didn't play up to what their fans were expecting. And what's the other team? Oh, the Steelers, obviously Mike Tomlin stepping away. But what are your thoughts on kind of those 4 teams getting kicked out?
yeah, Jacksonville, I thought they had a strong showing to start that game, but I think turnovers really changed the game for Buffalo there. I think they have a good foundation moving forward, and I think they have a good coaching staff. So it's just continuing to add to that, getting a full season Jacoby Myers. Pittsburgh, I mean, I called that from the beginning. I knew there was no chance in hell that they were going to score on Houston. We saw how bad that game was. Carolina surprised me a little bit. I know that they had beat the Rams earlier in the season, but I think that's, a good omen for them moving forward. They had a lot of success through the air with Bryce Young. Obviously, they may lose Rico Dowdle. He did seem a little bit upset, but they locked up Chuba for the next couple of years. So, how can they continue to add around Bryce Young? How can they continue to make that team better? I think they're well coached. They have a good future. And then the last team was the Chargers. Yeah, and the Chargers, I mean, that's the biggest one that I had some comments on. It's embarrassing to score 3 points with, a superstar quarterback that a lot of people consider a top 5 quarterback. With the opportunities that they had, right? His offensive line played the best game of their season, arguably.
Yep.
And, their defense played a damn good job too, holding them to 16 points. And it was 3-3, for most of the game too. So a lot of the scoring came late. It's just, at some point in time, we got to start talking about Justin Herbert as a good quarterback that can't get it done when it comes down to clutch time, right? He has never won a playoff game. He's looked atrocious in all 3 games that he's been in the playoffs, blew a 27-point lead to Trevor Lawrence, threw 4 interceptions, and then just looked god-awful in this past game with a lot of, opportunities in the past game, opportunities to step up in the pocket, couldn't really read the pressures. And, obviously he dragged this team to the playoffs, but when his team played the best game around him, he didn't show up, and that's the type of guy that Justin Herbert is. So there's no way in hell that we can consider him a top 5 quarterback. He's on the brink of top 10, but, he's a guy that we just can't rely on when it comes to late in the season games. He'll get you to the playoffs, he'll win you 8, 9, 10 games, but he's not going to get it done when it matters.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's kind of like an inverse of the Jalen Hurts situation, right? Because Jalen Hurts, his talent is down here, but he was winning all of these games. So it bumped him up single-handedly all the way up into the top 10. Now with Justin Herbert, he's got all the talent. It appears that he has all the talent, but then he's losing all these games. And so if winning can bump you into a top 10 quarterback, I think losing should definitely be able to bump you out of the top 5. And I don't think that there's any valid argument for people to say out there that it isn't valid to think. I mean, when we look at Justin Herbert, like you said, it was one of the best games the offense had in a long time throughout this season, right? That he had like over 3 seconds to throw. Sturb is going to be cringing listening to this. He says he doesn't listen to average time to throw, but it does matter. If you have this much time in the pocket, you're not able to find guys or throw
He
the
has
ball
good
away.
weapons that are getting open
Yeah.
too, right? You know that these guys are getting open. There's no question in my mind that in 3 seconds, Keenan Allen, Lad McConkey, Gadsden, someone's getting open.
And he had the one play, Lad McConkey on the crossing route as Herbert's rolling right. He's wide open. There's no safety behind him. There is absolutely nothing behind him. Herbert completely misses it. It would have been an easy touchdown. Like it would have been easy touchdown walk in. And even after the play, like McConkey's confused. Is there anyone behind me? What's going on? And Herbert just missed it.
And we talked about the offensive line play. Obviously, they played well in this last game, but a lot of people's excuses are, he hasn't had the talent around him. He's had really good receivers, but he hasn't, the O-line, his tackles got hurt. Joe Burrow went to the Super Bowl with, taking 60, 70 sacks in the season. So at some point in time, your talent level and the receivers that you have in a room just have to be enough to carry you, right? Defensively, the Chargers defense was better than the Bengals was that year. Obviously, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are great, but Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnson, Lad McConkey, Rondé Gadsden, Amari Hammond, right? Like they have Kamari Vidal. He showed up late, right? Like they have a ton of weapons, arguably more weapons than Cincinnati had in that season. And, they couldn't get by in a playoff game that a team didn't even score 20 points. Like,
yeah,
I got questions about, how good Justin Herbert really can be.
Yeah, because it's not like they just lost. It was you only score 3 points. Like and it's not a great defense. The Patriots defense it's solid, but it is nothing great. I mean, Spencer Rattler put up, I think, 17 or 18 points against them. Obviously, that's in the regular season, but still, like the Saints aren't working with a whole lot. And you have Spencer Rattler back there, and he's making it look like a trash. Like he made it look like a bad defense for a good bit of that Saints Patriots game.
And we mentioned the other quarterback didn't even look good. Drake Maye looked bad against that Chargers defense. So that shows you how poorly Justin Herbert really had to play.
Yeah, they had numerous situations where I'm like, oh, maybe this is the chance for the Chargers to go down and score. And then every single time Herbert would take a sack or something, it would just let me down. Like there's this one sack, Sturb, Ty, and I got in an argument about it of, he's standing in the pocket. It was the one where he spun out to his left and obviously just spun right into the guy and fumbled. There was immediate. So as soon as the snap happens, he's taking his drop. There is a huge gap to the left because there was a stunt. Obviously, the tackles went inside. I don't know if it's a tackle or a linebacker.
Loop, yeah, one of the tackles looped across, and it opens up that huge gap on the left side. And that was a gap that he stepped up into, multiple times and throughout that game. And he kind of sees it late. And he spins out late. The spin isn't even the problem, right? Like they teach you as a quarterback, spin out early, right? Like spin away from the pressure. He spun out, but it was so late. And Sturb's point was like, how is he supposed to see that? Yada, yada. There was like 2 drives later that he stepped up right into that lane. And now you could say, okay, maybe he went back, saw the tablet, looked at the stunt, right? But as a superstar level quarterback, you have to be able to see the front, see the stunt, see the guy looping away, know that the other 2 guys are probably in a loop. 9 times out of 10, they're crashing down, right? And if your offensive line picks it up well, there's going to be a huge gap. He's calling out the protections. He's got to be able to see stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's pocket presence, right? I mean, Drew Brees is only 6 foot tall, and he was able to navigate a pocket like it's nobody's business. He knew where everyone was on the field, and maybe that's because he was so short that it required him to acknowledge it even more. But Justin Herbert's a tall guy; like he should be able to see things even more than Drew Brees, and it didn't seem like he was seeing the field well or sensing the pocket presence or anything in that game very well. But yeah, outside of the Jaguars, I want to say that the Packers, really quick, I've been saying all season long about Jordan Love being Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Like he threw for 4 touchdowns. That game, the loss was not on him. I'm not going to put that loss on him at all. But in those last 2 plays, I couldn't like believe what I watched, right? Like the second one, the second to last play, he ran directly into a defender instead of stepping up into the pocket, ran directly into a defender and had to throw it. And then the last play of the game, fumbled the snap, panicked, and then threw it to the side of the field with only a running back and 1 receiver instead of multiple receivers. And it was nowhere near the Packers receiver. It hit just a Bears player. Like it didn't give a receiver a chance. And I thought that was just a crazy ending.
It definitely was concerning the last 2 plays, like, he did crumble, but you think about the rest of that drive, right, like, Jaden Reed had a drop, I think there was a
Yeah,
drop by
definitely.
Romeo Dobbs, it was kind of an indictment on, like, ho what the team looked like for the second
Mhm.
half of that game there, and honestly, the biggest story, you just see the loss of Micah Parsons, right?
Yep.
Obviously, they storm back offensively, playing well, but, when Ozzie Tropillo goes down, that's an opportunity where if you have your superstar edge rusher, he takes advantage of playing
Yeah,
against
you
the
can
backup
pressure.
tackle. They couldn't do that. They just didn't have the personnel defensively, so banged up. And I think it's sad to see what Green Bay ended up happening because of injuries, right? It wasn't, Jordan Love obviously had a collapse in the second half of the season in that last month of the season, but in the playoffs, played so well,
Mhm.
played as we would expect him to do, and they're losing, Micah Parsons, Devon Wyatt, like there's so many guys just across the board. They were out without Zach Tom in that game, their star right tackle. Like, a lot of that is just probably at the end of the season, you're banged up and you got guys that are just
Definitely.
inexperienced playing in the second half of a playoff game.
And that's the thing here is I not at all is this game on Jordan Love. There obviously the whole team collapsed, and I think a lot of it is coaching, right? Matt LaFleur, like you said earlier, potentially lost his job. He still has it at this moment in time. They're I think talking about an extension. But what are your thoughts on LaFleur? Do you think he has to win next year or he's done, or do you think because the Packers, I mean, obviously they're making it to the playoffs almost every season. They're a good team, but the coach is collapsing in big moments. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it really depends on what that contract extension looks like, right? Like, I mean, there's a real good chance that with him losing this season, they walk away from him. Obviously, there's been some rumors that if you can get a John Harbaugh, that's something that you step up from. Jeff Hafley is a head coach candidate that they could promote a guy like him and do something that Baltimore probably should have done last or 2 years ago. Excuse me, promoting Mike McDonald, their defensive coordinator, and getting rid of Harbaugh. So I like LaFleur a lot. I do think this season was, the ending to it all probably was more about injuries, but I see your point definitely about coaching late in the game and how you manage the clock and how you manage the offense. But uh, I think that if he gets a 3-year extension, it's hard to walk away from him next
Mhm.
year because you're going to owe him so much money. I
Yeah.
really think that it's he's gone this season or he has like a 2-year leash because that'll be 2 full seasons with Micah Parsons. If you weren't able to get it done and go to a Super Bowl or go to an NFC Championship game in those 2 years, and I really think it's a Super Bowl with how this team is built, that's when you start talking about moving on from a guy like that.
Yeah, and let me say this: we've seen two teams just go away from their playoff head coaches with the Ravens and the Steelers, and obviously they go away from those head coaches, right? Harbaugh and oh my god,
Tomlin.
Tomlin. Yeah, we already even mentioned his name, but anyways, those two guys, like you get rid of them, and they immediately obviously Tomlin's probably not going to be a head coach next year. Looks like he's taking the year off because you would have to trade for him immediately become the top guys in the head coaching search. And that's just it's an interesting spot to be because you're like you want a new era for your team, but at the same time you're getting rid of one of the best coaches in the league. And so it's a double-edged sword of do you want to keep going into the playoffs and losing, or do you want to try just taking a shot? It's an interesting situation.
I mean, your top 4 head coaching candidates might have all been guys that were fired in
Mhm.
Stefanski, in Mike McDaniel, in Harbaugh, and obviously Tomlin's probably not gonna take a job, but teams are inquiring about him. So those are your
Yeah.
top 4, like, hottest candidates that everyone's interviewing, a couple of offensive and defensive coordinators after that, guys like Vance Joseph, but that's what I was saying, we kinda talked about this earlier today in our group chat, like, is this maybe the craziest coaching cycle that we've ever seen where, 2 playoff teams fire their head coach, 4 teams that, the head best coaches on the market are the coaches that they fired, and then there's 2 other openings that are so attractive with young quarterbacks with, Cam Ward and the Titans and plus $100 million in cap
Mhm.
space, and then the Giants and Jackson Dart and the team that they have built around him. It's such an interesting cycle with those, jobs, 2 playoff jobs with all these great coaches. It's just gonna be crazy to see what happens, and we could still see LaFleur get let go. So and then there's teams that have had head coaches that have reached out about John Harbaugh. Like, I really do think that this might be the craziest coaching cycle we've seen in the modern era.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be an exciting one to see how it plays out. I'm so bummed. I recorded the TikTok of like ranking the positions. And obviously the Ravens the same night, because I was like, you know what? I've waited long enough. I don't think the Ravens are going to do it if they haven't done it yet. And then they release them 3 hours later. I was pissed. But yeah, it's definitely a crazy cycle. And let me say this, probably last thing before we head out here, but I'm excited for the NFC South, right? Like you said, the Panthers kind of surprised the Rams here a little bit. It's kind of seeming like the Saints, the Panthers, and the Falcons are the three teams that are sort of ascending, whereas the Bucks, I don't want to say are obviously going to like plummet. I don't think they are. They have Baker Mayfield, who's solid enough to get them into that playoff race in the NFC South. But with Todd Bowles as your head coach, I don't know if he's the guy for the future. I'm really surprised they kept him in and got rid of everyone else.
Yeah, I think it does depend on what Tampa Bay can do, this offseason with who they
Mhm.
hire as the offensive and defensive coordinator around Todd Bowles. What do they add to the roster? Because obviously they have a good roster, but coaching is so key. We've seen Todd Bowles, seemingly not do a great job, but does he bring in coordinators that can kind of prop him up? Do they continue to add to maybe the defense or, they were so unhealthy throughout this year. They're such a question mark that it's like you have to judge them coming into next season. And Atlanta may be a little bit of a question mark, but we get an answer on them sooner rather than later
Mhm.
with who they hire as a head coach. If they get a splash there, they obviously have a ton of talent. The quarterback position is a bit of a question mark, but Kirk Cousins showed you that he can. He only played the latter half of the season. They were one game away from winning that division, and then obviously Panthers have a lot of success. Tyler Shuck has a lot of success. Kellen Moore looked good. What do they add around him? But I think that the Bucks are a true question mark, and if they hit a home run this offseason, that division is wide open, but for a better reason than it was wide open for this year, right? This year is
Yeah.
like all these teams are bad. Next year, it's like, okay, all these teams are building and growing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely turning the division around very, very in a fun way. And it's kind of surprising. Like the AFC South was the comp for it the last few years, and the AFC South is still kind of dwindling. Like there's still teams struggling in that division, whereas the NFC South is turning around relatively quickly back to when the late 2010s or the mid 2010s when the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Saints were all competing. The Bucks are at the bottom. I wouldn't mind if the Bucks are back at the bottom because Bucks fans have been trying to be the rivals of all the NFC South teams. But if they go back to the basement where they belong, it would be great for us Panthers, Falcons, and Saints fans.
The AFC South is so interesting, right? Because they had the Colts, who were one of the best teams in the NFL before their
Mhm.
quarterback gets hurt. They had two playoff teams, and they have one of the hottest jobs in the market, but they still feel like they're so underperforming, like they did in past years. I think probably partially because the Colts collapse, partially because the Jags get eliminated round one. Like you don't have a good feel about that division, even though they had a ton of regular season
Yeah.
success.
Yeah, no, they're honestly like it is a solid division, but yeah, it's like the Colts are a team that is still a pretty big question mark, right? They went all in and now they don't have a couple firsts and you're kind of a question mark at quarterback, what they do with the Daniel Jones situation. The Titans could quickly turn around, depends on whatever head coach lands there and how they do in the draft. But yeah, the Jaguars and the Texans, it's really yeah, I don't see them as like juggernauts, right? The Texans very well could make it to the Super Bowl this year. Like, I'm not even trying, like, their defense is a Super Bowl defense, whereas they could just single handedly carry that team there. But the offensive side of the ball, like, I just don't think you're at that point where, like, oh, I'm worried about the Texans fully. Like, it's an interesting
Yeah.
spot for them.
The other one that's interesting for me is the AFC West, right? Because obviously, the Raiders are in a position to take Mendoza. They're in a
Yep.
position to add maybe a top tier head coaching candidate with a guy like Brady there with so much salary cap space and the number one pick. The Chiefs are in kind of a rebuild mode. Do they lose Kelsey? What's going on with Chris Jones? Like, they
They're,
obviously have Mahomes and Reed, but they have a top 10 pick. They're picking at 9.
they're like
So, like,
60 mil over in cap space, too.
right, they don't have. I mean, they'll get some
Look
relief
it out. Yeah.
if Kelsey, walks and they do something with Chris Jones and they restructure Mahomes, but it's not going to be a ton of cap space. And then the Chargers, right? They fire their offensive coordinator. What are they going to do at the offensive coordinator position to be able to get them over the hump at this point in time? They haven't been linked to any of the big names, so that's a huge question mark for me. Denver, really the only team that goes into next season with a ton of continuity, not losing many guys. I think JFM
Mhm.
is really the only starter they might lose, maybe like one of their corners, but they drafted Jade Barron to step up. A lot of continuity because they locked up a lot of guys. Maybe some changes on the, Vance Joseph walks, but like Jim Leonard will probably be a guy that steps up. Like, there's more continuity there. In the rest of the division, there are some question marks. Like the Raiders have the ability to be better, but the Chiefs, I don't know. They could be another team that just doesn't make the playoffs again next year.
Yeah.
If especially if Mahomes doesn't start the season.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Yet again, I will bring this up. My the prediction of the 9-8, the prophecy as I called it this whole season for the Chiefs. They end up finishing worse than 9-8. And the number of comments on that TikTok was like they're going 15-2, nothing less. Like I'm shocked how much people couldn't see, that the Chiefs were slightly faltering. I didn't think they were honestly going to be that bad, but they definitely weren't what they were in prior seasons. I don't think coming into the season, but
Part of it's the Mahomes injury, right? They probably would have
yeah,
been maybe 8-9 or something like
yeah,
that,
definitely.
but yeah, right, like that. No one foresaw that, and on my Denver prediction where I said 14-3 was the ceiling, 12-5 was the floor, and we ended up going 14-3. Everyone thought I was insane. They were like 9-8's the floor, and 11 wins is the ceiling, or 10 wins is the ceiling. Like they saw that team from last year that won 10 games and saw what we added and saw, knew that there would be progression in Bo Nix. And they really thought we would be the same or worse. And they saw what happened in Kansas City and thought that they would be able to keep the status quo. I think that just says more about some of the casual fan, man. Like they gotta, they call you, they say you don't know ball and that they're a ball knower, but gotta
Yeah,
study up.
Ty, I think this offseason we did a pretty good job with some of our calls. So if anyone's thinking out there, who are these two guys talking? You guys subscribe to the podcast and find out this offseason. Our draft preview and process will be coming out after the Super Bowl, and obviously going through the offseason with rankings and predictions, everything like that. Make sure to stay tuned. You guys know where to find us on social media at Jenks Island and wherever you get your podcast at Jenks Island as well. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you guys next week.